I grew up reading a lot. And I used to also read anything I could get my hands on. I read National Geographic, Scientific American. I would spend a lot of evenings with my father discussing the questions that I had about those articles and just reveling in, what are the newest scientific discoveries. And it's through those discussions in the evening where the seeds of wanting to become a scientist were planted. My father was a physician/scientist as well, and I think that innate curiosity inside me, fostered with those evening discussions, is what got me interested in science and wanting to be a scientist and to discover the answers to the questions and to discover nature around me. My research is in two main areas. The first one is I study the genetics of ethnic populations in Jordan. In Jordan, there are two populations, Circassians and Chechens, who were forcibly evicted out of their own countries because of religious persecution 150 years ago, and they've settled in many places. One of them was Jordan. My curiosity also led me later on making even more observations when there was the multiple waves of refugees that came and settled into Jordan, whether it was the Palestinian refugees that came in 1948 and then again in 1967 and continuously, or after the war in Iraq and now Syria. So Jordan has been a haven for refugees, and that led my curiosity to try to understand the experiences that the refugees go through in terms of trauma and war and displacement, how that impacts not just their mental health, but whether it is transmitted across generations in terms of epigenetics. Epigenetics is a new field of study. It's how the environment impacts your DNA expression. And the question that I wanted to ask that nobody had asked before, because of the complications of designing such experiments, was, can an epigenetic signature of trauma on a particular generation be transmitted across multiple generations? We know that it happens in mice, but nobody's been able to actually prove it or show a causation in humans, and that's what we're actually doing now. So there are a number of interventions that work on reducing the stress, and these really focus on the human-human relationships. So whether it's doing group work or working with families or community, and that's why my program, We Love Reading, is one of those where somebody is reading aloud to a child, whether it's a parent or a caregiver, and that human-human interaction, that eye contact, that bonding over a book is what helps the child and the parent deal with the increased levels of hormones and reduce that kind of stress. And part of what we do is saying that through evolution, we have evolved to cope with trauma, not just in a negative way, but also in a positive way. How are we resilient? How do we maintain our resilience in the face of trauma? And so one of the things we're doing is trying to understand the positive side of the impact of trauma and how do we survive. As a scientist, I do experiments in my lab and taught at the university with my students. However, I also looked and observed the community around me. And because of my curiosity, I realized that children don't read for fun. I grew up reading, and reading made a huge difference to my life in terms of widening my imagination, allowing myself to dream, giving me words to express myself. And I thought, if children would have that experience growing up, they would have more confidence in themselves, more empathetic with others, and could dream much bigger and wider. And so I sought to find the reason why don't children read for fun in Jordan. And by the way, it turns out that it's not just in Jordan, actually in many places around the world, even though children know how to read, they don't love to read. And I found out that the way to help a child fall in love with reading is if there's a parent or a caregiver that reads aloud to them, a role model, who enjoys reading as well. And that's how We Love Reading started. So I gathered the children in my neighborhood and started reading aloud to them once a week in the local mosque. And this was a family project. My children were involved, and my husband, and the whole neighborhood as well. And for 3 years, I did trial and error, kind of what today is called human-centered design, or I call it evolution, until I got reduced the program to the most empirical formula where the least input with the maximum output. And that's how We Love Reading came to be. And even in my personal life, I think trusting myself believing in my gut feeling, believing that I am worthy, and that it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to fail. And I will learn from my mistake, I will learn from my failure, and I'll keep on continuing. It's not that nobody is going to ever make a mistake, it's just you make a new mistake. And I think embracing failure, embracing being uncomfortable, and moving forward with a smile and saying, that's okay, I learned this today, tomorrow I'll learn something else, to me is the best way I have dealt with that challenge of my personal life. And it's about being simple again. It's about being a child again. I think that's what we forget. We all want to be adults when really just going back to being a child and enjoying what we do and doing things because we enjoy them is the most important lesson I have learned.